accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting in a hybrid model, both virtually and in person, on the Zoom platform and in person, in accordance with the town's policy directive and guidelines issued on April 1st, 2020, and amended on May 7th, 2020. I ask that all Public Works Commissioners, town staff, and presenters joining us via Zoom today to activate their video and mute their microphones unless they have something to say or are participating in committee dialogue. For members of the public, when I open the meeting to public comment, in order to be recognized, please use the raise hand option in Zoom or *9 by phone. If you are recognized, please state your name and address. This meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on the town's website. So first call to order. I, David DeLong, hereby call this meeting to order. We don't have everybody present, so we're going to do a roll call. We'll start with the members of the commissioners. Since all commissioners are on, one commissioner is unable to attend in person, please reply and state if you're present or attending remotely. Jeff Vassar, is Jeff Vassar?
Yes, present.
Perfect. James Terry.
Present.
Sven Weber.
Present.
Dave DeLong, present. Andrew Solomon.
Present.
Okay. First item of business is the review and approval of the minutes from January 11th, 2023, our Public Works Commission meeting. I asked for any comments
Sure, let me just give you a little overview.
of the minutes.
I'm sorry, I jumped ahead.
Yes. Because I actually have a comment on the minutes. It's minor, it's more a typo. This noise my
What page?
I'm sorry, if the numbers are not there, it's page 4. It's at the end of the very bottom, page 4, last paragraph. It starts in conclusion after discussion of the memorandum. Third line down, regarding the policies and concerns of the PW and PWC. I didn't know what PW was. That's Public Works Commission and Public Works Commission may have. I thought that might be planning board. I just wasn't sure if that. So that's what it should. That's accurate.
Yeah, well, it meant Public Works as staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It just was a touch on it.
I move that we approve the minutes of January 11th, 2023.
I second.
Great. Vote for approval. Jeff Vassar,
I approve.
Jim Terry,
Aye.
Sven Weber,
Aye.
David DeLong, aye. Andrew Solomon,
Aye.
done. View of the calendar.
There you go. So the calendar looks light, but I can assure you there's substantive matters that we'll be discussing. Sometimes we are reacting to issues or interests that sort of pop up, as they come or as needed. And others, we take advantage of the opportunity where it might provide some education, outreach, updates. I'm anticipating that we may be inviting the new director of transportation planning to a future meeting coming in, because there's a lot of interest with the Transportation Advisory Committee. We just have to nail down which meeting that would be. We also anticipate we'll likely be having an update on the solid waste recycling, not so much a hearing, but there's some substantive issues we think might be worth sharing. So those are, we're sort of jockeying those in, but you can see, the most important thing is what we do know of is sort of the town meeting prep and anticipation of town meeting. And if things are light, we do take the summer off if possible. So that's just where we stand.
When we come to your house in Bethlehem.
That's another meeting.
Okay. No action required. Just as an overview for the commission, virtually I think every item today is for background and overview. There are no votes that are going to be required. Helen, do you want to launch us into the roads program?
Sure. So I'm going to have Steve Duker, the town engineer, and Stefan Charterville, who's the public works engineer. come to the table, and give you an update. This is not looking back like we've been doing, but looking forward. And I think it's going to be, sort of building on some of the other communications we've had on what we've been doing with preservation with Steve. Maybe you can sort of tee us up, and I will get the presentation on. Let me share the screen, Bob, if I'm just want to make sure I have access here.
So I didn't get started.
Yeah, please.
So Steve, you can town engineer. Let's see. Numbers. So as we get into this, just wanted to remind everyone, we have provided regular updates throughout the year on the roads program. And that has led to tonight's meeting, which we call the public meeting. And that is typically what we have done over the years. Sometimes it's been referred to as a public hearing, but it's not truly a hearing. We get to this point where we've selected the streets for the coming construction season, and we present to the board, and the board and give the opportunity to the public to provide input to the project selected. So, and that's somewhat consistent with the roads policy that we talked about for a few times, and we have intention of updating that policy. Right now, the policy is addressing sort of a hybrid fashion. We really want to get to a point where we have a policy that everyone can follow and be consistent with in the coming years. So we'll be working on that in the course of the year and bring that to you for adopting, approving. All right, with that, what you'll be talking about, what Stefan will be talking about in his presentation, is that we have selected a 2-year program with the help of the consultant, with the help of for highway and grounds personnel, for water and sewer, the internal review process. We've selected 2 years worth of work. Now, obviously, we don't have 2 years worth of money, so we're counting on having, the budget that we have requested approved for next year. Now, we'd like to have a larger program, 5 years at least, so that we can do better coordination with the utility companies and even water and sewer, so that they can have their capital plans addressed along with our roads projects. But we're working on that. So we want to spend some time. Obviously, that would contingent upon getting the kind of money that we see in our 5-year capital plan. Once there's some kind of acknowledgement that we will be getting a reliable budget, then we could have a plan that we will call a reliable 5-year plan. And that's also important in answering residents' questions. A lot of people call, where's my street? It's in tough shape. In the 2-year plan, it's, we couldn't tell, but in a 5-year plan, yeah, it's very likely we can get to your street within that plan if the money is there. And we, based on the feedback we've been hearing from capital planning folks, they're listening, and there's somewhat of a promise that we'll be seeing better funding in the future. Let's see. So as Stefan gets into the presentation, we'll take a quick look back at the pilot preservation that we've done. We've got some good feedback on that, some not so good. We've learned from that. We've talked to a consultant, and so the trees that we selected this year, the variety of treatment, we want to continue the preservation because we want to preserve what's good. After not fall into a category where it's going to cost a lot to bring those roads back. So I'll just pass on to Stefan to get us into the presentation.
All right, thank you, Steve. Hi, everyone. Once again, Stefan Schroeder, Public Works Engineer. I manage the road program. So as Steve mentioned, get to the next slide, please. The topics that I'm going to be discussing today is a quick recap on what we presented back in December. Our consultant, the work that our consultant did on our data and our project management strategy. Then I'll go again briefly. I know we're talking about that a lot, about the strategy, what it means. Then go over that again one last time. And finally, I'm going to go into the street that were selected why they were selected. And I'm gonna conclude with remarks, concluding remarks. Okay, next slide. So for people who, I know the commission was already aware of that, but for people in the public who are assisting the meeting today, in the fall, we hired a consultant to review the data that we have on our pavement condition index, and also to review our strategy. And after the consultant completed his review, he determined that our backlog of roads was about $21 million. And so, and by backlog, what he means is if we were to repair every road today and bring every road to 100 PCI. So that's what that $21 million means. And that $21 million is subdivided into treatment bands. So we have about 4% that's in pavement maintenance, routine maintenance, that's crack sealing and fog sealing. About 38% that's in preventative maintenance. That's what Steve just talked about, that we want to continue, that we started last year. And roughly the same amount, 30% and 31% is in structural improvement. That's our mill and fills, mill and overlays. And 30% is base repair, where we have to redo the entire road from scratch. Next slide. So, so Stantec, after completing their review, their recommendation to us is the funding that Steve mentioned is too low. Typically we get around 2 million. They're recommending at a minimum 3 million, and we should even consider 4 million if we want to start eating down at the backlog that we have to do. Then they said we should continue the preventive maintenance. We should continue also with the preservation maintenance, just to see what works best for the town. Last year, we tried several methods, and like Steve mentioned, we got feedback from residents. Some was good, some we have to work on. So we're gonna try some new methods this year to see what results we get and apply those moving forward. And also what the consultant suggested that we focus in the next couple of years our funding on our collectors and materials to get those at a higher state, because most people in town use collectors and arterials. So you'll see when we present our roads program, there's a heavy focus on our collectors and arterials.
Can you explain that, Stefan, just for everybody, the collector or what do you mean by that?
Okay, so our higher traffic roads, so there's arterials, higher traffic roads, collectors are roads that brings two arterials to connect two arterials, and we have our local dead ends.
So some examples, arterials are Route 62 Main Street, Lexington, Cambridge Turnpike, those kinds of roads. Collectors are like Strawberry Hill Road, that's a collector. So collects from the neighborhoods.
Sudbury.
Sudbury is a material.
Arterial. Yeah. So Williams would be a collector.
Okay.
Okay, so this is our graph, our pavement life expectancy graph, pavement condition index. I know a lot of you seen that before, but it's important for us to emphasize what we're doing and why we're doing it. This graph on the vertical axis, it goes to 0 to 100, that's the PCI. That's the condition of the road. And on the horizontal axis is the life expectancy of the road. This is an idealized graph. Different roads, different traffic, the road deteriorate at a different rate. But basically that's the shape of the curve. In the early years, the deterioration is slow, but as you get to 7, 8 years down the road, the deterioration the decrease is exponential. And also you can see the costs of the treatments in the different treatment bands. That's what we're talking about. In the past, Public Works, we typically waited for we did maintenance on our road that are worst first, so in the lower band. So now the approach, when we say best first, is we're trying to hit the road holistically. So doing maintenance at every treatment band. So on our routine maintenance, that's a $2 band. We want to touch some roads there. And our preventative maintenance is between 9 and 18. We want to touch some roads there. And finally, and our structural band, before we get to the base rehabilitation, we want to touch on those there. By doing that, we spread the money around, we keep the network as a whole at a higher PCI level. And we address more lengths, more miles of road per year, due to the cost savings that we're doing by doing preservation. Now, with that said, our consultant emphasized for us to focus in the first couple of years our program onto our arterials and collectors. You'll see that that's an expensive list of streets that's selected. On the third slide, you can see it on the map. You'll be able to visualize what exactly what streets we're picking. Next slide, Alan. Next couple slides. That's just the list, but on next one. Okay.
Let me refresh that. You keep speaking.
So on the
I'll take
map,
it down.
you'll
Yep.
see, you'll be able to visualize where we're gonna be spending, the plans to spend our budget in the next 2 years, mostly on arterials and collectors. There are some local roads and neighborhoods that were also selected. You'll see that too, but mainly it's gonna be on our arterials and collectors.
Next one has a ton of names. Let me see.
Let me ask Stefan a question.
Yep.
Since while we're waiting here.
Yep.
Also, you have the map.
Has your policy changed or has your procedure changed since our December meeting? Because, you know, there were, I brought my December, my packet here, and there were a bunch of streets of all different categories
Yes.
that were going to be in the 23 and 24 budget cycle. And it looks like now you're going to be focusing on the arterial and the collectors.
No, so it didn't really change. So in the December meeting, the list of streets that we presented to you, that were all the streets that were in those 3 treatment bands. So preservation, routine maintenance, structural improvement, and preservation. And of those streets, we focused on the arterials and collectors ahead of locals and local dead ends. But no, it did not change. It just the focus. We focused it more on collectors and arterials. So as you can see, the plan is to do Main Street from the Lincoln line all the way to Commonwealth in the next 2 years. To do Old Pickard and Old Marlboro and all the way to, I think that's Williams. So these are long stretch. Then the pink is the fog sealing that we tried last year. The fog sealing basically is used on roads that were paved 3 to 5 years ago. It adds life to the streets. It prevents cracking from happening. So the pink ones are streets that were paved in 2018. So that's what they're the candidates for fog sealing. We're doing Lexington Road from the center of town all the way to Route 2A. We're doing Old Bedford Street from the townhouse all the way to, what's that intersection again? Bedford Streets.
Yeah.
What else? We're doing Walden Street from Haywood all the way to Route 2. So these are long stretches of road that we're going to be attempting to do in the next couple of years. As Steve mentioned also, as you can see also, there are some neighborhoods. There's the Madison neighborhood. There's a couple of neighborhoods scattered in there that we were supposed to get to last year, but got postponed because of National Grid work that didn't happen. But now they're back in the schedule. As Steve mentioned, last year we did some preservation, especially we're still looking at those to see how they're performing. We got good reviews on some and some not so good. The Nurse Snack neighborhood, we're still watching. There's a lot of chips still remaining. We're gonna look at it after the winter to see if the plows winter helps it. But the plan is if that doesn't improve to a standard that we're satisfied with, we're gonna apply a microsurface on it from College Road to the loop. That's gonna make it a cape seal, that was used last year also on Hildred Lane as an example, just so we tried that out already. And that's about it for the program in general. Also to people's knowledge, we invited the residents to today's meeting so they could hear what we had to say. And there's also a more elaborate meeting with them next week where they'll be able to ask questions and get their feedback on their specific streets. I will inform you of any feedback we get on that, either by a memo or another meeting. We also sent the list of streets to all the utilities, both, well, we have meeting internally with highway and ground and water. We sent it to Verizon, National Grid, Comcast, and CMLP to see if they had any plans that fall within our roads. If we hear back, when we hear back from them, we'll let people know. With that, that puts an end to my presentations, and I open the floor for questions.
And this list now represents what budget? 3 million?
Roughly there, I think there's about $5.5 million of construction.
So divided by 2, okay.
So yeah, 3 million would be that number, close to get all of that done.
So is bonded wearing surface course different than what we did last year?
Yes, we have not tried that yet.
Can you describe what that is?
So bonded wearing course is an open graded asphalt. What that means is that there's a little bit more void in the regular asphalt. It's not pure HMA that you see on the roads. It's a thinner layer. It's about 3/4 of an inch, but it looks exactly like asphalt. We don't expect to get any bad or questions on that treatment when it's applied. People won't even know it's not regular asphalt.
Will it be noisier?
No, because it's open graded, so there's less point of contact with the tire. So it's less noisy than asphalt.
Okay, but I'm thinking of Nurse Neck Hill, College Road, Barrett's Mill. Those were noisy,
Yes.
but this even open makes me think that the tires will make noise. No?
No,
Okay.
that's not how.
Actually, so the state MassDOT used to do a lot of open graded asphalt on their main highways for the very purpose of reducing noise. The air in the gaps are supposed to reduce noise.
Okay.
Yeah, it's little tire
So
contact.
the next question, which I think Steve has almost answered, is since it's a new feature for us, are there contractors that do it? I mean, last year you had difficulty finding contractors who would do it for the right price and the right time and all that.
So yeah, so unfortunately, it's the same two contractors. This bonded wearing course is Allstate. We did not have a problem with price with Allstate. The problem last year came with the CIR method, cold in place recycling,
Yeah.
that we're gonna try to pilot again. To see if we can get better prices. We picked locations that lend better to it with no cul-de-sacs
Okay.
or dead end.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try that possibly on Old Pickard and Old Marlboro. They're straight runs, not many driveways, not many instructions. So the point of CIR is it's a quick process. The same day people could drive on it, and the cost should be lower than a regular FDR. That's the promise. We'll see.
And part of our strategy is also to bid these at the right time. It's competitive. And if there aren't a lot of vendors who can do it, the sooner you can go out to bid and sort of secure them for the season, the better. So that's always the challenge and balance of the year-to-year kind of budget cycles that we sort of have to address, the availability and the competition. So, these are things that, Steve has been trying to advocate on. How can we parlay enough funds so we can get out ahead of the curve? Every community deals with these challenges, but these are things that we're sort of trying to pay attention to.
Yeah. To add to this, the 2-year contract that we're trying to implement this year will help that a lot. If they see they have $1 million of work next year, that gives them an incentive.
Okay. Good.
So can you explain how this 2-year plan changes how you're going to town meeting, what we're asking for at town meeting? Or is it maybe that's in the future?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, right now, our ask is, Steve, maybe you can talk about the specifics. We've already made our ask. And it's, so our 2-year plan is not a promise that we're going to get everything done. So we prioritize, we look at sort of what bids we can get out. And then, if we know we have a certain amount of money available, some of the work that wasn't done last year. And we've got, for the most part, support for it was close to $2.5 million, I think, for this, for FY 24. Now, it's not a bird in the hand yet, but it's got the support from town manager's office, the finance director, and we'll be going through the hearings, very soon. We'll be talking about sort of the annual town meeting. But our job is to advocate for that and explain what we're doing and why. To be very clear, we've asked for more than they've identified. We can explain what we're doing and why, but that's part of the messaging and outreach that we need to go through between now and then. So this is basically if we get the funding, this is the direction we're going.
Right. And if we don't get the funding,
Then we will have to curtail this, but we've got a sort of a little wiggle room as far as what we can't do, 22, 23, 24. We're just gonna, use this list, lean on it, but you can't secure it. We're not coming to you tonight saying, approve these streets, because it's, what we're after is just saying, this is the process that we've gone through to identify the needs. Explain it. We'll begin talking to the abutters about this. We're going to be talking to the FinCom about this. And we've been continuing to talk to a town manager's office about how to get through this challenge of road improvements that the town needs, and part of our advocacy. So I think it's going to be, these are the streets that are going to be hit if we have the funding, but it's not going to be added to. I mean, this is basically what we're targeting. It's only a matter of time we're going to hit these streets. Question is going to be in the next 2 years, or 3 years, or 4 years.
I'm just a little concerned about, I have no question about what your plan, no qualms with your plan. It sounds very logical. I'm just concerned about the larger budgeting environment, given what the citizens are being asked for.
Let me make a comment. I mean, they've got money left over from fiscal 22, which ended last year because they don't have it done. Fiscal 23 is right now. Fiscal 24 is town meeting. And this is a typical thing that is in the budget for capital programs every year. So it's not as though it's new. It may be a little bit different in size, but it's there it's been there every year. And it's not an article that gets a whole lot of discussion at town meeting. So I don't think that from that perspective, will it get approved? I would be very, very surprised if it did.
Okay.
And some of the monies that we're spending now is for the design. So the challenge we always have is a project isn't just an idea and an implementation. It's identify the need, figure out what the funding sources might be, but we need to start with design soon. And that's low cost. So that's going to be part of the roads program, no matter what we do. There's always a design component. This just allows us to start targeting these streets. So we then get the real, what's the cost going to be, go out to bid. And so all these pieces, it's from a project management standpoint, it's not ideal. No question. But it's how we do things in the municipal sector. And, we're trying to be more efficient with some of the techniques, but the process is kind of very well established. This isn't different to that.
And chapter 70 money is.
Chapter 90.
Chapter 90 is in addition to
Correct.
what is it?
So-
That's money that comes from the state.
That's right. So the state allocates somewhere between about $600,000 a year.
And that,
Yeah.
and we understand that they're coming to be, the end of that 10-year program is now, but they haven't told us what they're going to give us, and we wouldn't know until after March.
I think in your discussions around funding, might be helpful to show stronger how the cost goes up with waiting longer.
Mhm.
Because that's not kind of a linear function.
Yeah, something.
And really, right now you have it in that curve, and perhaps there's a different chart you might want to build where you say, okay, if you do it now, it's $2. But if you do it then, it's whatever was the maximum, 72, yeah?
Yeah.
Where you just show that by delaying the stuff, you're just not delaying $2 for 5
Yes.
years, you're delaying to whatever,
That
50
extension.
plus bucks.
That'll be part of the FinCom presentation when we have the opportunity.
So
to
could
present.
you let us know when the
Sure.
FinCom presentation is?
Yes, yeah, and we'll talk about town meeting and articles and
Yeah.
schedules later in the agenda, so, yeah. Dave, anything, there's
Any
a,
other questions?
I see someone, Carleen, Reed has got her hand up. Bob, can you allow Carleen to speak?
Hi, Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. I live close to two streets that are not on your roads program this year. And they were at one point. They are Temple Road and Isaac Davis. Now, I drove those roads this morning. They are in terrible shape. There are residents there who have been asking me to ask you, please pave those roads. And I have one question, well, two questions. First off, what's the PCI value for those two roads? Because I want to see where it fits on your handy dandy scale. I like Sven's comment about if you keep waiting on this, it's going to cost even more. And the second, because I have a feeling it's probably under 40, when are you going to put Isaac Davis and Temple Road on your roads program? Please do it soon. Thanks. That's it.
The question, let me help. We are aware of the condition of those roads, and we can tell about the PCI number, unless I know
They're below 30.
that.
Both of them.
Right, and there are amounts, several other roads with low condition indexes. And we have to program the project based on pavement condition indexes, use of the road. And we had a discussion about arterials and collectors, so heavily traffic roads, that is factored in. So, and then you have to use the budget that you have to address the priorities. And some of these lesser used roads will not make it into the 2-year list. But as I was trying to say before, if we have reliable funding, we can spread out our program. And I'm venture to say, if the funding keeps at the level that we think we're getting, those roads will be addressed within a 4 to 5 year time frame, maybe even sooner. But we are aware of the condition of those roads, and we will continue to try and bring them in to the fold as the budget allows.
Carleen, did you have a follow-up? Is that correct?
No, I think, no, we have, I think Fran.
Yes,
That's fine. I still didn't quite get the PCI number for those two roads.
Stefan said they were under 30.
I have Fran's email. I could forward that to her tomorrow. I don't want to answer on top of my head for both streets, but I think they're both in the 30s or below.
What's clear is they're in very bad condition. That's identified. It's not like they've been given numbers and somehow it's being missed as far as a priority. It's a priority, but I think what we just hear is it's not going to be a preservation. It's not going to be a low-cost alternative. It'd be a very, more expensive reclamation to bring it back, but it has to fit within the puzzle. And it's not that every road isn't important. It's that we have to prioritize in a way that is transparent. And that's what we're trying to do with this approach. And so we recognize it doesn't make every, resident happy with every decision. There's going to be those that we have to prioritize and those that we have to identify, but it can't go on for a long period of time. The engineer knows that because of the condition it's in.
Just, assuming these streets are all done, how many miles of very bad conditions do we have left?
Most of us.
Everything.
So if you go to the presentation, about 30% of the roads in town are in that lowest treatment band.
Yeah,
That's
so,
about $6 million if you were to do all of those today.
so you're doing with these program half of it, or how
No,
much do you cover all that?
so if you go to the selections of streets, the roads that are being, if you have the presentation and our list, everything that says reconstruction is in that lower band of streets. The mileage is not listed here, but I could send that to you guys.
Yeah, just to get a sense.
Yeah,
of
so
how much is
Stefan,
left.
where should I go?
The fourth slide, I think. So in those two slides, everything that has pavement rehabilitation is mostly mill and overlay. That's in the middle of the treatment band. Everything that has reconstruction is that bottom band, that most expensive. And preservation is that in the middle band where it's $9 to $18. But I could get the exact
It would be good to
percentage
get a
and
sense of how much.
miles
condition
of that
is left.
backlog that we're hitting.
Yeah.
I could do that.
And there's always this backlog. This is the dilemma year in, year out. And that's why identifying the real costs and needs and then moving forward, because until we do, we're just gonna forever be falling behind. And that list of deterioration is just gonna grow and expand and get more expensive. So we have an awareness, but the challenge is just to try and get that funding. And we've done a good job capturing the needs. We have the team that's actually been working with a third-party consultant to ensure that we're vetting the models properly. And before these roads, as part of the selection, as Stefan mentioned, engineering sat down with Highway Grounds, who are the people who have to do all the maintenance. They know where the roads are in bad condition and sort of, proof from their perspective, what are we doing and why? And even to them, someone said, well, we spent a lot of resources repairing and maintaining this particular stretch of road. Why isn't it on your list? The sooner it is, we save some costs on the maintenance, and they're right, but it's just a matter of, we gotta catch up. We gotta catch up, with our program.
Let me reiterate something that Stefan described. Remember you showed the band of treatments?
Mm.
Right, and everybody agrees that we are going to be spending money, we should be spending money on every band, because if you look at the successful programs out there, other towns, nearby towns, that's what they're doing. They're keeping good roads good.
Yeah.
Right, so, but if you're in a band, say, let's say the lowest band, right, the reclamation band, which Isaac Davis and others for. The experts tell us, don't do all of that now. But do some of that, because whether you do it this year, next year, the year later, it's the same project, right?
The cost is still, except apart from inflation, but it's still gonna be $40-something square yard.
And then you look at that band and you have to get, what are my priorities? Obviously, if you have main roads with high traffic, that would be a priority because of the demand on the public in terms of maintenance, of public works and so on. So you really want to hit those priorities, but we will get to those other streets. Hopefully.
So another way to say it is, you don't want to spend all your money right now on the worst part. You want to spend some money on, let's say, routine maintenance and preventive measures to help them moving into the more
Just
expensive.
prevent them from moving down to the
Yeah.
expensive, yep.
Steve, I have a different question. Is there different treatment to main roads and not main roads? Is it thicker or whatever? Because it gets more traffic, so obviously it's going to have more pounding or weight on it.
That's correct. If you're doing a mill and overlay on a main road, you want to do a deeper mill. And you might do just a 2-inch on a local road,
Right.
on a
Yeah.
main road might want to do 3.5 inches.
Right, so like Madison Drive is not gonna be anywhere near the same as Main Street or Lexington Road.
And if we reconstruct, say, Lexington Road.
Yep.
You wanna end up putting like 4 inches, 4 or 5 inches of pavement, whereas if you do Madison, it would be.
3.5. So yeah,
Yeah,
the Commonwealth that was postponed last
Sure.
year, it's 5.5 inches of pavement that's gonna get put back. Madison is 3.5. So the cost is very different. Even though they're similar lengths.
We have several citizens who have their hands up, who'd like to participate, I'd like to get them in. Fran,
Yes,
Hi,
hi. Fran Lewiter, 77 Temple Road. And we've lived here for just close to 37 years. And in 2001, Temple Road, and I believe Isaac Davis also was repaved. And I think and it was done really poorly. And so we're talking almost 22 years ago. Your slide of when you want to do construction only went out to 21 years. We're already at 22. You have another, at the earliest, Temple Road is going to be done in 2025, which is 24 years, which isn't even on your chart. So the road was done really poorly. And within a few months, there were potholes and cracks. And it's been patched many, many times, most recently in the fall. I mean, there was somebody outside of our house, somehow right in front of our house. It's almost the worst potholes. And they were filling the holes with whatever substance they used. And guess what? The holes are back. So, I mean, there's been a lot of money put into to trying to fix this, but it's just been really, really bad. We're lucky we haven't had a lot of snow this year, because when it does snow, it's very hard for the snow plows to clear the road very carefully. If you want to walk on it, it's very dangerous. Even though we only have 20 houses on Temple Road and Isaac Davis, we get walkers not only from a Nurse Neck Hill Association, but also from people outside the neighborhood. And in fact, this morning when I was driving out of the neighborhood, I saw these two people, or there's a family of 4 that come up here all the time to walk, and they walk on our street. Temple Road is also used, it has been used in the past for kids to learn how to ride bikes. It's a nice flat street, and that's getting hard to use. It's getting hard for families to use that for bike riding instruction. It's also getting hard even to push a stroller around. So I really wish that there was some, I've listened to this, I've talked to Stefan, I still don't have a good understanding of how you select roads. I mean, I understand that these roads that are arterial roads need to get done more often, but we're talking now, you have a plan for 2023 and 2024. So if Temple Road isn't going to happen until at least 2025 or 26, we're talking about 25 to 26 years after it was repaved originally. And I just don't understand why that happens. And if there's some way you can do some interim maintenance that would be better than what's been happening, that would be very helpful as well.
thank you.
Well, I can respond to the fact about the maintenance. We will work with our highway grounds maintenance folks and see if, they can do some interim work until we get to the street. We have a lot of streets that are, unfortunately, we can't speak to what happened 21 years ago. What I'll tell you though is that if a program remains grossly underfunded, you find the tendency to try and do work that's not the proper treatment. In other words, Band-Aid type work. And that is possibly done 21 years ago. Incidentally, the life of a new paved road without some minor maintenance is about 20 years. So in order to prolong the life, you've got to do things like routine maintenance, preservation type stuff, you get more years. And we do have people who call in and talk about the streets that haven't been worked on for 30 plus years. So we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Getting that quality control, quality assurance is really important. And again, it's the desire to meet community expectations sometimes results in you do something, but is it, done effectively? Or is it just to, pacify? Our program isn't to pacify, and we're very, very understanding that there are a lot of needs. There's a lot of interests out there. And it really is challenging for staff to tell people that, there's only so much funds that's got to be allocated. Our interest in why we come to the commission is to talk about the process and make sure it is something which is not just staff deciding, well, who and who's where's the loudest voice is not always where's the greatest need for the community. But it doesn't mean the loud voice isn't, justified.
Yeah, and I think we have to acknowledge the frustration in the community.
Yeah.
Again, I'm here in Concord only now 2.5 years. But my observation is that we have years of underfunded investments in infrastructure, and roads is one of it. So at a certain point, you get to the point that there's so many streets to fix that you have to start, and that's what you're trying to do now. But for everyone in town, I think it has to be clear and needs to be voiced, probably to select board and finance committee, that funding for infrastructure is important, and that funding needs to be provided. You try just to solve against kind of the equation on the funding we receive, but in the end it goes back up to finance committee and select board.
And, one suggestion I have for highway and grounds is that if we've identified streets that are in poor condition and we're going to go and patch them, we need to have a roller that goes with them so that it is well compacted. Because I know that on a street that I sort of go down every day, people came in the fall and they did patching, but they just tamped it down. And probably just like on Temple, our street, it doesn't. There's more gravel on the side of the road now because that's where all the pothole repairing work has gone. So if we're going to do it, we ought to do it in a certain few streets that we know are really poor, and that we can do it effectively so that the patches will remain for a couple seasons instead of half of a season.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And I'll make a couple of comments that are sort of new topics for this, but I really appreciate the fact that you guys are working on the concept, the process, and the strategy. And so these are intended to help support that type of work. My first question though is a tactical question, and chip sealing, which was done on, I believe that was the name for the treatment that was done on Nersnack Hill Road last year. Has that been temporarily or permanently abandoned, or is that decision still under consideration? I think that's important to make it clear, particularly next week when you talk about the status of the program. And then two other sort of broad points. I was the chair of the Fiber Broadband Completion Task Force, and one of our recommendations in our report that we generated last year was to ensure that coordination, which you did refer to, with the utilities about opportunities, for example, to install conduit under roads that are going to be reconstructed so that people in those neighborhoods have an opportunity to get fiber where it might not be available for another 20 years if that's how long that road is supposed to last. So I think it's important that the program identify structurally when that coordination is able and available to take place, and ensure that it's being done as you prospectively look at what roads are going to be reconstructed. And I don't expect you to necessarily comment on that now. I'm just sort of raising awareness of that recommendation and asking that when you do present the program, for example, at the enterprise hearing, you've locked that piece down. And finally, and it's been referred to several times, it really does appear to me that there is a long-term structural deficit in spending on roads that needs to be really highlighted, particularly for the Finance Committee and the budgeting in the budget guidelines process. And it occurs to me that you I think mentioned $21 million. That's where it stands now. Is it possible to reconstruct how much that number was, say, a few years ago, and project it out going forward? If that's not done, it sounded like you need $3 million a year. You're only getting $2 million, and that problem's getting worse. And that's the kind of thing that I think really needs a larger conversation about allocation. And the main thing that this particular program can do is identify it as a number with a longitudinal chart that's available, that we have to at least look at the enterprise hearing every year to see how big is that problem and how big is it getting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, which one do we take first? Let me talk about the chip seal. So Mark, you mentioned chip seal. So we always have to remind people that the chip seal that we did on a nurse snap on other streets is not a chip seal of the past. It's just actually called asphalt rubber chip seal. It's a different product altogether. Still chips involved, but they're blackened. We have come to believe that streets like a nurse snap that are much less traveled, very shaded, lots of trees, and so on, may not be the right place to apply this treatment. And but there are streets like Smart Smell, even College. Those are much more traveled, and the asphalt rubber chip seal is performing quite well on those streets. So we have some streets that we've selected this year, Stefan. For asphalt rubber?
No, we have not.
You have not to say? Okay. All right, so we're giving a rest for a year. But we will pay attention to nurse snack here, as Stefan was referring to earlier. And we have programmed into the budget or into the projects to do the microsurfacing. Maybe part of the street or all of the street, but we have put it aside in the program to include.
Yeah, and it's clear on a nurse snack, we've been keeping eyes on it. It hasn't improved. So there was the whole concept of this, sort of treatment is over time, it gradually improves. It was a sudden change immediately, happened quickly. And the expectation based on observations elsewhere, and even what you could see in a well-traveled area, it does improve over time. In this case, we've gone up, we've seen, the fact that there is kind of gravel and it just doesn't seem to be adhering. So it's pretty clear that, for those reasons, more site specific. And we also have to question the application. It was late in the season. I don't know if that was an issue, but these are things we're taking notice. We don't want to take a good preservation technique off of out of our tool of opportunities for the right place. But I think engineering is sort of, that was why we piloted this. And, regrettably, it caused an upset into the neighborhood, not by intent, but we're responding to that. So.
About the coordination on broadband and other utilities, those are always part of our program. We put the plans out there. We let them look at their capital planning and can they get anything done. Often we hear from the light plan that their budget too is very limited and they have priorities. And so that's something that's kind of out of our control, but we do put our plans out there and allow them to do their own planning. Is there anything?
Are the other utilities pretty responsive?
Yes.
Oh.
The gas company, they have a lot more money, so they can do a lot more replacements. Water has a program every year or couple of years. They have an area they want to go into. This year, they're going to be doing the water project on the
Butternut Fox
yeah.
Lane.
and our list of projects includes going back in there and doing the paving afterwards.
One more with Tom. Thank you, Mark.
Yes, thanks. And my name is Tom Grimalia. I live on Deacon Haynes Road. I've been here about 11 years, and I have a gentle reminder, a quick question, and a recommendation. And the gentle reminder is just to make sure that everybody's aware that in another week and a half or so, there will be a vote on additional funding for the new middle school on Old Marlboro. So that is scheduled to be constructed from May of this year through the end of 2024. And then, of course, the old school will be removed after that. So, and I guess my quick question is for the planned improvement for Old Marlboro, is it the Goldilocks project? Meaning it's not too much, not too little, but just right, given the fact that there will be construction going on for a year and a half and then removal of the old school. And if that is the Goldilocks approach to do that project, then just a request to make sure that the projects are coordinated so that they can stay out of each other's way and get them accomplished in the most efficient manner possible. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. So when you're figuring out, what, oh, I'm sorry, Pam Gardner, Cottage Street. So I've been a complainer, but I'm glad to see them at least on the list. When you're figuring out the rehabilitation techniques you're gonna do, I understand you've got the pavement condition that you're considering, but is erosion and stormwater management also figured into that plan?
I would say generally no. Because the way we get the money for pavement management. It's a bucket of money towards trying to get that PCI up. I don't know if you're aware, PCI has been dropping. But we have requested for funding for drainage and stormwater management. Right now, there's a whole lot of money programmed for that area. But there are thoughts of maybe getting some more in the future to cover it through stormwater utility. That's been discussed. Should we have access to that kind of money in the future, we can do a more holistic road project where we go in there and we do not just the pavement, we can do drainage, and if we have sidewalk money, we can do sidewalks and all of that. But because of the way the money is appropriated right now, and most of it is actually through bonded debt, they sell the debt for pavement improvements and not other types of improvements.
All right. So for specific questions regarding to one street, should we wait until next week? Should we contact you, either of you directly?
Yeah, thank you. That's
Either or.
great question. So there is a meeting and we highly recommend that, we think the abutters who receive notice of the work will be attending a meeting to talk more specific design, site specific issues, and feel free to call into engineering and, have a sidebar at any time. But I think this was talking about the concepts of the streets to be covered. The specifics on your street could be well handled at the next, meeting. And just, talking directly with the engineering group.
But that also seemed like a lot to cover in the next meeting. So how long is that meeting with all these streets?
Well, I think it's, I think they had a meeting last year with just a handful of people who attended. So, the interest is dependent.
Dependent, yes, depending on how much people attend the meeting. If we need to be discontinued to do a follow-up, we will.
But we always open, we always open taking
Phone calls too.
phone calls, emails.
Okay, thank you. So is that, have we covered,
Yeah.
the roads program?
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Booker is on deck for culvert assessment.
Let's see.
That's it, yeah.
Take a seat.
No, it's, we have guys up there.
Steve, do we have, let's just make sure, okay, there's Justin. So I'm gonna introduce Justin Richardson. He is the assistant town engineer. This is a project that he's managing. Justin, if you can, I think you are engaged, if you can sort of give us an introduction to this, and I think we have a couple consultant or two who might be here to help with the presentation.
That's correct.
Okay.
So as Alan mentioned, I'm Justin Richardson, the Assistant Town Engineer, and the next item on tonight's agenda is the discussion of the townwide culvert and bridge asset management plan. Just to give you guys some background, after the Sawmill Brook emergency repair project on Monument Street, it became pretty apparent to engineering that we needed to update our 2011 and 2012 townwide culvert inspection report. So in February of last year, 2022, engineering put out an RFQ for a townwide culvert and included bridge asset management plan. After the selection process, Wright Pierce was the preferred candidate. We negotiated the scope and fee for the project and eventually executed a contract with Wright Pierce. Wright Pierce is actually the same consultant who performed the design plans and assisted engineering with the construction and inspection administration for the Sawmill Brook project. So the purpose of this townwide culvert and bridge asset management plan was to provide engineering with an up-to-date condition assessment of the town-owned culverts and bridges, and also determine if there was any immediate threats. We didn't want any more emergency repairs, essentially. As mentioned before, the bridges were not previously inspected, so we didn't really have any condition of them, except for the ones that were inspected by Mass DOT, and they provide us inspection reports every 2 or 3 years. So additionally, as a second part of this project, we incorporated an asset management portion to the project, and this is basically to provide engineering with a plan for repairs and general maintenance of the town-owned culverts and bridges, with an estimated funding source or requirement for that. So here with us today are 2 Wright Pierce representatives, Jason Gallant and Owen Chaplin, and they're going to be providing you with a presentation on this project. So I guess take it away, Jason and Owen.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having us in this evening. So we've prepared about a 10-minute presentation that I believe Alan has, and Owen will give the majority of that presentation. And the focus here, like Justin mentioned, was to take what was a previous condition report and really work that into a program that the town can base decisions on based on the risks and assess the priorities as options evolve or as conditions change over time. So with that, I think we can get to that next slide, and I'll turn it over to Owen to talk about the process.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason. And thanks, Justin, for the intro. So I'm going to kind of quickly run down through the overview of this presentation, and yeah, we'll jump right into it. So we're going to talk about inspection process. We're going to talk about the rating and ranking process. We're going to talk about the program recommendations, and if time allows, we'll show a couple screenshots of what the database and the mapping looks like. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the inspection process for the culverts, we use the latest AASHTO guidelines for culvert and storm drain systems. This is a 1 through 4 rating system, with 1 being good, 4 being the worst. And this is quite a bit different than the rating system previously used, where it was a 1 through 5 rating and 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. So it's inversely rated. We converted all of the previous data into the current rating system for comparison purposes. Wright Pierce didn't look at all the culverts. So we looked at about 90% of the culverts that scored 8 or better. So 8 or better, these are culverts that were previously scored as good condition. So we didn't look at all the culverts. that previously scored well. So we looked at 20% of those culverts. Culverts that scored 8 or less, we looked at about 90%. So in total, we looked at about 120 out of 170 culverts. And then essentially pulled together some reports. The field data was collected using iPads and ArcGIS using a program called Survey 123 that was easily exported into Excel spreadsheets in which we use to analyze the data. So that little table on the right kind of shows you a comparison of 2011 versus 2022. And you can see the culverts in general have deteriorated about almost 5%. Next slide, please. So bridges. So bridges, we used the standard FHWA National Bridge Inventory Standards, NBIS. This is a 0 through 9 rating system, with 0 being the worst. The town has responsibility of about 12 bridges. 7 of those are over 20-foot span, all NBIS, which are inspected, as Justin mentioned, by DOT every 2 years. Bridges less than 20-foot span are non-NBIS bridges, and those were inspected as well. We did not inspect the 3 town leased bridges, which are part of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail system. They're relatively new, so we didn't look at those. This table to the right here kind of just summarizes the bridges and gives conditions. So bridges that scored 5 or less, so 5 being fair condition, 4 being poor. About 50% of the bridges were either fair or poor, and about 50% were better than fair, good condition. Next slide, please. So the rating and ranking process for the culverts. We developed a weighted condition score, which sticks with the 1 through 4 rating system per AASHTO, and considers inlets, outlets, pipes, and roadway, and applies different weights to them, and generalizes those into a few different maintenance statuses. So depending on the type of treatment recommended, it would fall into the following maintenance statuses. Routine maintenance, which is, less costly treatments, flushing, cleaning pipes, spot repairs. We have rehabilitate, which is more significant repairs like slip line, wall rehab, or maybe a reconstruction, some stream restoration work if there's significant scouring. And then full replacement, which is a full replacement of the culvert, new wing walls, head walls, work around the stream. So this table on the right here kind of shows you what the results are from what we found. So the 0 through 12 inch and 15 to 18 inch culverts, the smaller culverts, kind of almost evenly spread across the board in terms of routine maintenance, rehabilitate, replace. But as you get up into the 24, 36 inch, 42, up to 60 inch culverts, you see about a third of them are in the rehabilitate state. And so our goal in staying proactive with this asset management plan is trying to keep culverts in the routine maintenance category. It's less costly, obviously. We don't want them to be in the rehabilitate state. We definitely don't want them to be in the replacement state. Culverts that may have been in the rehabilitate state, we looked at hydraulics for some of these culverts. So culverts that were 4-foot span or more, we did preliminary hydraulic models on using USGS stream stats for hydrologic flow data. Essentially uses a regression technique to come with conceptual flow numbers. So we developed preliminary models for some of these culverts. So culvert that may have fallen into the rehabilitate state and were originally proposed for like a slip line. Maybe that culvert is undersized. So we determined that with the preliminary hydraulic models and bumped it into a replacement state. And so the ranking of the culverts was risk-based. So we came up with a risk score for each of the culverts, and that's a 1 through 25 rating system, and considers likelihood of failure and consequence of failure. Now, likelihood of failure is mostly based on the condition of the culvert, but we looked at a few other factors as well, such as flows and traffic loading, depending on the road classification. Consequence of failure is more based on geographical factors, proximity to utilities, bus and rail systems, sidewalks, road classification, environmental impacts, things like that. So the ranking we used prioritized high risk culverts, and we found that many of the high risk culverts are in the Assabet River watershed, specifically on Spencer Brook. Next slide, please. Bridges. Similarly, we kind of generalized them into these maintenance statuses: maintain, rehabilitate, and reconstruct. We did add a fourth category, which is preservation, which is fresh in your minds from the previous presentation on roads. Preservation is a lower cost that preserves the existing structures. And then the risk analysis we used for bridges was essentially the same as culverts. Consequence of failure, likelihood of failure. We found that Elm Street Bridge was the highest risk culvert. And the table on the right here kind of shows the ranking. So you can see the maintenance status and the risk usually correlate. So the higher the condition, poor condition of the bridge, the higher the risk. So you'll see the rehabilitate and reconstruct bridges are higher up on that list as they correlate directly with the risk. Chamberlain Bridge, although it's a reconstruct, it's not the highest risk. This is because that's a pedestrian bridge, as many of you probably know. So that doesn't rank as high on the risk as a road or as a bridge that's maybe located on an arterial or collector road. So that's why you see the Chamberlain Bridge further down on the table. Next slide, please. So recommendations. So we developed a 10-year plan. Within that 10-year plan, we have 86 culvert projects and we have 9 bridge projects. On any given year in the 10-year plan, we have $600,000 to $3.2 million worth of culvert projects. We have $12,000 to $1.8 million worth of bridge projects on any given year. So in total, over the 10 years, we're looking at a range of 9.7 million to 11.9 million in culvert projects and 4.7 to 5.7 million in bridge projects. So the question is, how do you support and fund all these projects? There's got to be several different funding avenues to consider. Local dollars through bonding, potentially a stormwater utility in the future. Then there's also grants. So the Municipal Culvert Replacement Assistance Grant, there's the Municipal Small Bridge Program, and then there's several FEMA grants. Next slide, please. So here's a snapshot of the database itself, which is in Microsoft Excel. It's fairly hard to read this snapshot, but it kind of gives you an idea of how much data we're dealing with here. Going from left to right, the gray and white columns are location information on each culvert. The green column is the planning year assigned for that particular culvert. The salmon pink columns are the likelihood of failure, consequence, and risk scores. And then we have the weighted condition score. And then we have the recommended treatments, the maintenance status, and the subsequent costs of those treatments. So all this data is kind of used and can be filtered to make a determination on which culverts fit into which years. So what we did is rank the highest risk culverts first and try to fit those into the, you know, the sooner years, the 2024, 2025 years. But if you wanted to filter and just look at culverts in a particular watershed or a water body, you could filter those and look at those and maybe rank, okay, I want to see all the slip line projects for that particular watershed and lump those together for better bid pricing. So there's many ways you can kind of filter all the data, but it essentially comes down to that green column, which is the planning year. Next slide, please. So this is a little screenshot of the mapping. So the mapping comes with the database. So when you open the spreadsheet in Excel, the map will pop up as well. There's a few different layers. The screenshot you see there is the culvert planning year and opinion of cost. So the brighter dots are the culvert projects in 2024, 2025, you know, the projects we're prioritizing first. The darker colors are the projects further out, up to 2032 and beyond. The larger dots represent more costly projects, and the smaller dots are less costly projects. But there's several different layers that you can turn on. So we have the same kind of graphic for bridges. And then we also have kind of these heat maps that represent risk, which we talked about a little bit. But that kind of gives you an idea of what the database looks like itself. Next slide, please. I think that's about it. So I hope I kept it to 10 minutes. A lot of information there, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the chance to chat with you about it.
Did you map out a little bit the cost over the years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Steve, the question as far as we have cost estimates. The question is, do we have this mapped out over years? You know, as we're doing our budget, I think we had gone through the exercise earlier to populate a 10-year plan. I think it went from 5 to 10 years. I imagine this is going to inform that. It's just to be clear, regrettably, we don't have a lot of money in funds identified for FY24 for this work. We did have funds to do the analysis this year, and that's what we're doing low cost assessment work right now to identify and really validate some of the needs that we had, you know, sort of identified. I think what you really want to pay attention to is there's a process to do it. Again, we want it to be transparent. We want to make sure that it's not just Steve, the town engineer, said so, and then we have to follow the next town engineer who has a different opinion. We're trying to standardize, and I think using, you know, working with third-party consultants up front, it's really important because there is a level of expertise that's required. But once we have the system, I think when you go back to this particular tool that we're just sort of describing, which was a bunch of columns, this is a tool that our engineering division can use. And this is really important as we get information, we try to prioritize and try to figure out where the money needs to be spent, what projects might be included as far as slip lining or maintenance. So we're getting tools, but it's complicated. And, you know, most people don't think about this, and this is part of this, you know, the buried infrastructure, the infrastructure that hasn't really been prioritized. And you're hearing discussions about, well, how do we pay for this? Well, it's important that we know what this is. Right. That's what we're talking about today. Then the question is, how do we pay for it? And I believe, excuse me, we've been informed from the town manager's office that she set aside funding for us to evaluate the stormwater utility for the town. This is because communities across, you know, the continent are dealing with stormwater issues, and they used to call it sort of the orphan of utilities. And we are now highly regulated with the MS4 program. It's a quality and quantity issue. It's a climate resiliency issue. And so what we really are just identifying and, all the preparation in order to get to this database required a lot of effort. The good news is now staff can sort of maintain it and understand it. That's what the engineers will do. But this really is the beginning of a program to allow us to help the town understand what the needs are. And that's really the purpose.
But you requested like $710,000 for culverts and bridge repairs, and you got 25. So this is not even in the right order of magnitude. So what was the town's argument to just, let's bring it
I
to
think
zero?
we have to realize that the finance committee set a guideline for the schools in the town.
Okay.
And the town manager gets requests from the different departments that are in excess of what that guideline is. And she and the department heads have to talk about what they can do, what they can wait, and there are probably not too many people are happy. Because you're right, since Alan and his team has been involved with Public Works, we've been identifying the fact that we probably have not been doing things appropriately funding-wise in the past. So we are now in a position where we've identified the fact that we have funding deficits. And now the next point is when can those deficits be shortened up or eliminated so that in fact we can make progress toward one of these things. I wanted to ask one question. And the question I have is, like in the roads program, we had to decide which is where you go first with your money. And it was because costs didn't seem to be linear in the fact that if they got worse. But what's your assessment from what you've done as to, do we approach the ones that need to be replaced, or do we spend money all across the board? What's a way that you have seen is appropriate?
So it is, okay if I answer that?
Yeah,
Please. Good.
Okay. It is somewhat similar to the road program in that with culvert and bridge infrastructure, your goal is to keep a good condition. So if we have structures on the bridge side, say, that are perpetually in that 6 or 7 range, you're going to have a state of good repair. So it's non-linear degradation of structures once we get down in the 4s and 5s, so the deterioration happens faster. So we try to not get in that zone. But what we're recommending is a blended program so that you can keep the good structures good. And we've gone through and looked at a horizon. So we've looked at a framework to compare a snapshot from 2011 to what we're observing now, and you can see sort of rated deterioration. So you know that you don't have to focus in areas where there's the deterioration is lower, but where you're seeing advanced deterioration, that's where we're making recommendations, and that factors into those risk factors. So understanding that, like the Monument Street Bridge, for example, if there's a near $1 million project there, we understand that that's harder to deal with, or at Pale Factory or at Elm Street, Elm Street's looking like today's dollars with the rough estimating or preliminary estimating that we've done so far. We're in upwards of a $1.75 million project to restore that stone arch. So we know that that's not something that most municipalities just sort of have set aside. We know we need to plan for that. So we look at what interim measures we can take, what monitoring we can do until that can be tackled. But in the meantime, look at opportunities to keep the good infrastructure good. And then the next piece of that is we did an overlay, and we have a meeting tentatively scheduled tomorrow with the state to talk about the culvert replacement program, and your Spencer Brook area, Spencer Brook Road is a high priority with the state's vulnerability assessments for habitat connectivity. So we work to try to pick off the structures that are highly probable to get grant funding so that we can support the program that way. So we look at targeting the risks, and then we look at targeting the lowest hanging fruit from a funding standpoint.
Thanks, Jason. That's helpful.
Are you prepared to answer a question about like, so what do you do with this? Does this now mean you put a new item in the budget or how,
Well,
or?
So to Sven's point,
Yeah.
we've made asks. And in fact, we go back 2 years, we started populating, the question on, was it Cottage Lane, or, are you gonna do the drainage as well? What we found in the past is all of the capital improvement funding that was managed through engineering was combined into projects, and it was very difficult to track where we're getting progress, because projects would grow based on underground infrastructure, stormwater, curbing, all sorts of complications. But we have at least identified the bins now. So we say, we're gonna spend money on pavement, we're gonna spend money on bridges, we're gonna spend money on traffic management, because we want people to understand where the money is going, and it's not up to staff to somehow make $2 million turn into a $10 million of needs. So that's why we're trying to be very clear with where the cost centers are. The discussion that last year, by putting millions of dollars of needs in the culverts, we knew that was the case, that's order of magnitude. We had to put it somewhere to get the conversation going, and the conversation going is, well, this year, we certainly don't have money, or next year, but we have $100,000 to, let's explore what a stormwater utility might look like. Why? Because that may be a source of funds that we could draw from, because this is a need of the community. There may be a source of funds where if we can get real money, we can start investing in the stormwater management. And again, we're not alone. There's stormwater utilities that are popping up across the state for the same reason.
Oh, that's a dumb question. What is a stormwater utility?
Stormwater utility becomes a ability to look at the costs, and the funds become sort of whether it's an annual fee based on how much stormwater is, sort of generated from sites, and it includes commercial sites, it includes residential. It's a way of looking at the demands and impacts of the services and allocating a fee structure for that.
So this would be a separate charge, it
would be like a water or sewer charge of some sort. And again, these models are out there, and it's only in the last 10 years you see it really taking hold, primarily because people are looking at the MS4, that's the regulated stormwater through EPA, to say communities need to be responsible for this infrastructure, quality and quantity.
Right. Are there other towns around here that have?
There are, yes, there are, yes. Yeah, and that's what we'll be looking to work with a consultant to help us understand what model might look best for Concord. Then we'll have to go through a process, a public process. So our job is to get facts, information, and make sure that it's not just, because we think so. Organize it, and then let the community figure out, okay, how do we sort of address these needs?
Okay. Yeah. Great.
I'm just concerned of, this is a proposal for the town meeting is for the next fiscal year. That means
it's nothing to do, we have no money.
This takes till forever until some money comes.
So,
and then the costs are continue to go up. And we have the same situation like we have on the roads, we have on the bridges.
to be helpful, the $100,000 is ARPA funds, not going to town meeting. The 75,000 is really just to continue, but we have $100,000 to get moving on this evaluation for stormwater utility this year.
And does the town have kind of some emergency budget in case, let's say, Elm Street Bridge?
Yeah, that was in essence how we had to cover the Monument Street failure. It was emergency. Yes.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you hired the consultant that you did, because I think that they did a very good job. I would think it would be appropriate, Alan, if you could send that to all of the commissioners, the presentation.
Sure, definitely.
Thank you, gentlemen. Jason?
And you guys will also be receiving their final report when they've completed it, so that'll be forthcoming.
Great.
Thank you, Justin.
Yep.
Thank you, team.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Do you think we should wait then? I mean, is the final report going to be a whole lot different than the?
No, they have a pretty good understanding. The order of magnitude of costs aren't going to change.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's not.
It will only go up.
Okay.
In the interest of, our families, I'm gonna just remind people, love to wrap this meeting up by 6 or soon after.
Sounds good.
So, just for those presenting going forward, Director Cathcart,
Sure. Yeah.
hopefully we can cover the warrant and the, committee coordination.
Yeah.
On the warrant, I want to disclose that, anything on, Article 36 and 37, they're mislabeled here. I'm conflicted because I'm the sponsor of this one.
Yes.
This number, that's,
Okay, so.
Yes.
Yeah, so what we have in the packet, and both of these items are sort of information. So we are at a point right now where it's just important for the commission to understand the warrant has been closed and published. So just for your convenience, we sort of bring it out for the, not a lot of discussion at this point, but the packets haven't even been sent out. You know, all the article, the warrant will be sent to all residents, but I want to make sure that you folks in your duties and responsibilities had sort of an opportunity, early opportunity to start looking through these things. I wanted to flag those areas of general interest to the commission. When it comes to, there's routine articles in here, and I just want to kind of, I'm assuming you've had a chance, you can read through the packet. So not to belabor the point, the routine things are simply that. They're sort of processes that require us to, ensure that we're going to have funds available for, the various activities. I'm not going to go through each one specifically, but I did flag, and I wanted to make people aware of article. I don't know, I'm sorry if it was misnumbered. We have a couple citizen petitions that I think are important. And I provided some context. The update to the Concord noise bylaw is something that I would ask you to sort of look into, talk to people. There will be, in part of the packet, if you look at the front cover, I actually provided the complete warrant, give you a schedule of hearings so that at least it's on your radar. Those are opportunities to hear different people's perspective and understanding. We'll come back to the commission to go through where's the commission stand and where is it appropriate, and what articles are of interest. I literally just took out what I believe would be, important to highlight, but I also want you to have the whole packet. There's a variety of other articles that sort of indirectly may relate to us, but, I just wanted to flag those things that I thought was important for public works. I did miss one in the development of the briefing I think it's important to flag. I think it's the CPC funding. That is Article 20, is it 26? Yeah, 26 in the packet.
Yep.
And two of those items, the cemetery restoration, $340,000 were on the list. That's for the stone wall initiative that we've talked about. So that's of interest. We definitely want to see that through. And then the other one was the War Soldier Monument preservation. And that's something which actually Public Works is sponsored. You know, it's on the land, you know, for, you know, in the Monument Square that we're responsible for. So I didn't flag those, but those are important. They're of interest, you know, for, you know, Public Works. And I think really just wanted to, you know, identify, without going to the specifics now, we will have a conversation at a later date, but before the hearings and discussions, this is sort of a kind of heads up on what's actually been printed.
I'm sorry, is everything in here then you think of interest to?
No, that's the whole warrant. It's just worth, you can look through it, and I didn't want to, you know, I took my best shot of what I thought was important enough. The things that are
And how do we
directly
know
related.
And which one, how do we know which ones?
That's
those are?
this.
Oh,
And in the memorandum
gotcha.
that I have, I flagged those articles that are, you know, more routine or important.
Somewhere in that plan.
So, first page, it's from me to the commission, talks about the capital improvement debt plan. It's in that packet. I feel like I am, Dave. As soon as you get a packet of information, you start shuffling like cards, and then you're,
Can't do that.
Okay, oh, great, all right.
This is really just to help you folks understand what's important. And any questions, and, you know, I'm always available for,
Okay,
you know, sort of to reach out. I don't want to belabor the point, but most of these things are just routine articles. And we may determine through the vetting process and hearings, if there's anything of interest that might, there'll be a decision what goes on a consent agenda at some point. Those are items that are not controversial or particular, you know, interest to have a lot of debate at the town meeting floor. Many of our articles just get put in the consent agenda. If someone's interested in pulling it, we'll work independently with one of the commissioners to present on behalf of the commission and to the town meeting.
are we gonna meet again before, we're meeting again
Yes.
before town meeting, right?
That's
So
right.
we can ask this twice,
Yeah.
we can decide who's gonna attend.
Exactly.
Town meeting.
And I just sort of encourage you to spend some attention to those articles that we flagged, at least for, you know, awareness and, you know, any and all if you're really interested.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. We're then on to, is there anything you're all set?
I just want to make sure that's in the records.
Sugar in your day. 36 and 37. So we'll be on to boards and committee.
Yes.
Interests.
Yes, and this was in response to some of the commissioners were identifying an interest and need on, you know, what, if any, more, you know, opportunities or, you know, roles might they want to play when we have, there's always potential overlap with other boards and committees in town. I want to just highlight for you that there are, you know, 54 different boards and committees. There's a lot of targeted interests, special interests. This information is all available on the town website, but I just wanted to print out so you could see the master list. And then while I was doing it, I just thought it might be helpful, especially for some of the newer members, at least to flag those committees that, you know, based on experience, have a little bit more
Often have
interaction, you know, with the Public Works Commission. So it's not that I haven't captured all of them, but I just gave you a quick overview of information I just pulled off the web. So if you're interested in any of the committees listed, the web is a great source of information. You can link to each one. You'll see the members, see their agendas. But I just thought, in response to some of the interests and trying to understand what the commission would like to do moving forward, this is just a prompt. So it's really up to you folks to, you know, sort of have a discussion on what.
So David, I'm gonna suggest that if there's time in next month's agenda, that we bring this memo with us and have a discussion as to whether we think it's appropriate to have observers, and then who might be willing to be those people. David, or Alan, I've got one request for you.
Yeah.
If something comes up
Mhm.
that you're aware of, that other committee is going to talk about that could reasonably impact Public Works, could you let David know? And sure, and he could then communicate to us and say, hey, there's the planning board meeting on February 27th. It's going to be discussing blah, blah, blah. You know, someone might want to watch it or something like that. You know, could be Board of Health, could be any of those things.
Yeah, we'll see. And this is sort of, because there's so many committees, and I want to make sure I don't miss something. Oh, you know, it's just, it may be one of those things that staff will take a look for. I do get notice of the planning board meetings, I think the NRC, Board of Health. So I can look at some of these and I'll focus on these. And if you see anything of interest, we can talk a little bit more further at the next meeting about how we might want to, you know, kind of share the opportunity of knowing what's going on around town. Right. Yeah, definitely.
I only have, because you highlighted a few, I had two that sparked my thing, specifically given what the discussion we just had. Is one is the capital planning task force.
What task force?
Capital planning task force.
Okay, yeah.
If this is something we want to at least listen into, given our capital demands. And then connected to the planning board, of course, is the zoning board of appeals. So that these were the two out of the kind of list of, I counted 66 commissions that spark at least some thinking on my end.
Okay, good.
And so next month we'll discuss sort of how we would monitor these. Or whether we want to have observers in any.
That's right.
committees.
And understand what role level of participation does the commission want to.
Do we know if the town continues with Zoom even after, let's say, May, when COVID emergency is over?
My understanding, Zoom is going to continue, yes.
Yeah, that helps with coverage.
It definitely helps. And it's a great point, Sven. Many of these are recorded, so it doesn't require real-time attendance if you're just interested in tracking or seeing what's going on. You know, so it's at your convenience, you can go back and look. And the nice thing with Zoom with agendas, you can even go to the section of the meeting that you're interested in. So you know, you can miss all the commercials if you like.
Okay.
Okay.
With that, we completed with that topic. There's another discussion for next month, so I'm sure that'll be on the agenda.
Yep.
Director's report.
Sure, we're gonna start with, so we have 15 minutes on the clock. So we're gonna keep to, you know, get this report done in 10 and see if there's any comments and questions. I'm going to go to, let me open that up. We're gonna start with water and sewer because I always seem to get the short shrift at the end of the meeting. Let me pull up,
Special going first.
well,
Definitely.
welcome.
We talked enough about roads today.
No, engineering will go last on this, so. All right, just need to make sure I get that up here. And share. Share. Okay, there we go. All right. Jeff Morosky, Water Sewer Superintendent, please take it away.
We've got 3 slides tonight for water and sewer. I'm kind of doing double duty on the second slide of 3. Both of the first 2 slides have to do with public outreach that Public Works is doing. In the month of January, we had representatives of both water and sewer and of engineering going out to the 5th grade Concordians. Once again, we do make a regular thing of this and we do love it. It's the Alcott Elementary School, Willard Elementary School, and Thoreau Elementary School. And we were giving presentations on the water cycle, the fate of transport of both surface waters, groundwaters, how water travels through the porous media, which is our aquifers. And in addition to this, slide number 2, we were also presenting on both stormwater and on wastewater and how things are different. I came from a combined sewer system community out in the northern part of Worcester County, Pittsburgh, Massachusetts. What's being shown here, upper left-hand corner is a storm drain casting. That's a cover and manhole frame. Lower left is a sewer manhole cover and frame. The structures of manholes are fundamentally the same. It's just an access point into the piping system below the ground. One thing I would point out, and I don't like in this picture, is the sewer manhole cover has 2 pick holes that penetrate through the cover, and that allows inflow to get into our sewer system. So in the current manhole castings that we use, they have what are called blind pick holes. So you can put a pick into like a little dimple on the edge of the cover that doesn't penetrate all the way through the cover, so rainwater won't enter into the manhole through that blind pick hole. But in the upper right-hand corner, it's pointing to the differences and kind of distinguishing what a separate storm sewer is. MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. That's the 4 S's. If it were not a separate storm system, that would imply that stormwater is being conveyed by a different means, or there is no storm system whatsoever. So in the right-hand side of the graphic is a combined sewer system, and that has both stormwater and municipal and industrial and commercial wastewater going into the same pipeline. They're bigger pipelines that are intended to convey wet weather. And even big pipes can have their capacities exceeded. So in a combined sewer system, eventually it reaches its no-mas point and it can't transmit any more water and needs a relief valve. And that would result in untreated wastewater in stormwater intermixture being discharged to the environment. In the left-hand side, we're showing what's a separate storm sewer and also a separate sanitary sewer system. So they're independent of one another. They're not interconnected with one another. Toilets, businesses, residences, they travel through the sanitary sewer system and get treated at the wastewater treatment facility and get discharged to the environment as treated effluent, meeting NIPD's permit. Both stormwater and wastewater are both regulated through the Clean Water Act, and the NIPD's program is a NIPD's element for both stormwater and for wastewater. Let's go to slide 3.
What's wastewater?
Wastewater. Pet peeve, it's one word, it's not 2 words. It's not wasted water. It is a water that's conveying human wastes, and that should be biological wastes or toilet paper. When it has things other than human wastes and toilet paper, that's where problems start to happen. So sink drains, toilets, showers, dishwashers, clothes washers, those are all discharging wastewater from a home.
Whether it's gray water or sewer or
That's correct.
right? And then there's stormwater. Is there a third? I thought I heard a third one. Just those 2.
No, it's just those 2.
Okay.
That's not to say that stormwater is clean. It's actually transporting surface pollutants, particulate matter, hydrocarbons from roadways, fertilizers, pet wastes that aren't collected properly. So it can be dirty. Usually a first flush of a rain event, like the first 15 to 20 minutes of the rain event, will wash away most of the pollutants. And when that happens, it's being captured and transmitted and reaches our wetlands and our waterways. There usually isn't much in the way of treatment to the stormwater system. The grates prevents large debris from getting into the system. Most catch basins will have sumps on them that'll let heavy particulates settle out and not travel into the drainage pipe. But it doesn't treat per se in the same way that a wastewater treatment plant treats.
Dave, you might be thinking about industrial wastewater. which gets on-site treatment before it goes into our system.
Okay.
Well, it may or may not. It may receive some form of pre-treatment before it gets discharged into the municipal wastewater system. So eventually it would come into the wastewater system, but it may be required to have some measures of pre-treatment before discharge.
And none of these are natural. They're all kind of man-induced, and hence we have responsibilities to control them and to some degree treat them.
And we're regulated to do so.
100 years ago, sanitary waste was discharged directly to rivers and streams because it was convenient.
Right.
We're learning that stormwater may have a similar fate of how much do we really need to pay attention and just discharge. Very quickly, Jeff, on this one.
Right, unfortunately, I don't have enough time, but I would like to talk about this. This is our very first deployment of a eye hydrant. And that's not fabricated by Apple Incorporated. It is a special type of hydrant that are only made by McWane hydrant manufacturers, Clow, Kennedy, M&H. We deployed and installed our very first one. Fortunately, it's dark outside, so you can't see it, but it's outside the Lowell Road wastewater pump station. This has the ability to measure transient pressures, and transient pressures means changes in pressure with respect to time. And often that's very bad for piping systems. If the pressure goes up or the pressure goes down, it can create something called water hammer. It can lead to breaks. This system, and we're testing it out with this very first deployment. The manufacturer, you always have to take what a manufacturer says with a grain of salt. They would recommend 1 out of 20 hydrants in the system is one of these devices. Now it would be 67 for Concord. We've got over 1,300 hydrants in the town. But we're looking at this one as our first deployment to see the information that it gives us. One of the things that gives me sleepless nights is when we have water main breaks and we can't find where the water main break is. That is something that can happen. It's not always witnessed and observed. Sometimes we have to hunt the town to locate the location of the break. Devices like this can help narrow that down and speed up our response time. Restoring service to the community that lost water service, et cetera. So we're very excited to see what this possibly can do. Its unit cost is 50% higher than what a regular hydrant would be, which is not exorbitant. It's not multiple times the price of a regular hydrant. So I hope to be able to give the commission an update once we have a little bit more on this. We're going to get the technical side of this. A technician will be out in the month of March, a little bit after the March PWC meeting. So maybe in April or May, I can give an update to the commission on this.
See how smart it is. Okay, we're gonna go to highway grounds. I don't know, Eric Shaw, are you out there?
I am here, Alan.
All right, Eric. Eric Shaw is the Assistant Highway Ground Superintendent. Eric, if you just really briefly give us a quick update on some of the slides here from the director's report.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so in this picture, it's our sidewalk plow in operation, obviously. Looks like he's going through Emerson Park, which is kind of new to our list of things that we have to plow this winter. But that's one of our regular operators, just making his first pass through there this year. Next one, Alan. This is our wash rack that we built a couple years ago. Part of the issue with winter maintenance is keeping the salt out of the vehicles post storm, getting things washed up as much as possible and extending the life of our fleet. So this was a pretty nice thing that we were able to build a couple years ago, and the guys love it. It makes it much safer, much more efficient to wash vehicles post storm and really throughout the year. So the guys they like getting up there, getting the trucks washed out really clean so that they're ready for the next storm. And then this is looks like an example of our we do around manhole covers when we have some pothole repairs. As you can see in the picture on the left, the edge of that cover is raised up, and we have these kits where we can buy sort of these rubberized rings that you sort of melt in place. That will kind of bring that edge up. So when plows go by during the storms, they're not catching that. If you're in a plow truck and you catch the edge of that cover during a snowstorm, you're going to wish you hadn't. It's a pretty heavy impact, and so we try to provide some safety for the guys by adding those to manhole covers when we can't make proper repairs through the winter months.
All right, Eric.
That's
Thank
it.
you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Steve Dukran, you want us to sort of bring us home?
Sure. So, but we can't talk about stormwater without introducing
Oh.
our new engineer.
Yes.
So, and he's there, and his primary focus will be trying to get our MS4 program, our stormwater management program back in shape and going forward. And this plan up there is actually Saul's doing. He is designing an improvement to, what do you call this? Fairyland?
The Fairyland Park.
Fairyland Park. If you've been out there, you've seen how bad the parking lot is, with ponding and so on. So he's developing this plan. Hopefully we have some money that we can put towards doing that construction this year. This year is a project for the Main Street and Walden Street intersection. The town received a grant for almost $200,000. We have gone through some design. It's been final design now, but this concept has been presented to Historic District Commission, to the abutters, essentially a public meeting, and it's pretty well received, I must say. But so we're moving to final design, and hopefully we can get construction done starting as soon as possible, because the grant is required to be spent by the end of the year.
Now, I will say, and I don't know the specifics, but I know the historic district has interest. This is a situation of multiple departments, committees, commissions, interests, and their focus, as it should be, is on the historic nature of this improvement. I will say it requires additional time, energy, and attention and money as a result. I'm not saying it's a good thing, bad thing, but it's something to be aware of when you have multiple interests, and it's just the challenge we've talked about in the past as far as what's the balance of the competing needs and interests of the town, and hoping that boards and committees work collaboratively. Just an example of that.
Do you want to know what the project is about? Have you heard about it?
I heard about it.
Can I just ask, are those crosswalks gonna be raised at all?
No,
No.
it wouldn't be.
Okay,
And whereas we would like to raise feature there
yeah,
to have the people slow down, the existing elevations are not great. The sidewalk to the north side, it's very low, and it's kind of a mystery why that whole location is like that. And but if you raise anything, it'll be just so
Yeah.
difficult to make it work.
yeah.
This is Main Street, and this is Walden, just to orient people. And again, these little bump outs are going to create visibility, safety for people crossing, slow people down as far as traffic, and ultimately improve some of the confusion that people have depending whether they're coming on or off Walden. So good project, and it's grant supported, but we're hoping that the funds and the schedules can be consistent with the monies for the grant.
Is everyone aware of that deadline? Like all the people involved that have to approve it? And maybe not.
We've been saying that.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's difficult with public meetings having the
Yeah.
schedule, keep up
Exactly.
with the deadlines like that, but.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. So is that complete the commissioners'
Director's report.
records reports? Any comments from the commissioners? Sure. Any public comments? Let's see. Make sure everybody is included here.
Don't see any from the,
I think we're all set.
yeah.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
Second motion. Jeff is, I'm afraid that we've lost Jeff. I don't think Jeff is here, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.